Hello and welcome to my mechanics and gameplay assignment video. The mechanic I've chosen is sword combos. Here is the player. The player can walk, sprint, jump. The player has stamina, which depletes after doing stamina required actions like sprinting, jumping, and attacking. If you see the top left, it has a state machine where the initial state is the idle state, which then switches to walking if you move, and then sprinting, jump state, full state. And with the mechanic, I've chosen the sword combo. You can attack, which is the attack state, loses stamina. And then if you press the attack button again while attacking, it will do a combo. This combo has three animations: first, second, third, which is like a thrust. We have these target dummies, which you can hit, which makes a noise, has a little shake and some particles. Do a little combo on the dummy. With the stamina, if the player runs out of stamina, it stops being able to do any stamina required actions like sprinting, jumping, or attacking. I can't attack. No, I can. Now onto the coding overview of the video. So here's the player character script. In this script, we have a begin play, which handles the setting up the inputs, assigning the states. Then it switches to the first state, sets up the stamina, sets up the sword with the collider parameters, and the actual collision on component begin overlap. Then when this is done, it will close this weapon collider. It has functions like setup stats, which assigns the stamina. In the tick function, we have a ground check, and then a with the body of the state machine, which switches the states and runs the state update and checks if the state needs to be switched with the state transition, and that returns the next state. If it's a different state from what it already is, it will switch to the next state. Tick is also responsible for handling the player's stamina regeneration and the bull checks, which is disabling sprint if it's not grounded or hasn't got enough stamina. The handle stamina function checks if it requires or is allowed to regenerate stamina if we have stamina to regenerate and if the timer is over the cooldown. We also have a check here, which is before each stamina required action, where it essentially says if you've got enough stamina to do the action, you can do it. In the player input component function, we have the binding of the inputs. For example, the move action is bound to the set movement input function, or the attack action is bound to the attack function. We have a function to enable and disable sprinting and toggling the ball. This function is responsible for moving the player and is ran on the movement state. We have a function to control the camera. We also have a function to switch to the jump state and the attack state. In the attack state, it does a check to see if it's allowed to attack, and then if it is already attacking, it will do a combo. Here's the switch state function, which is saying which is where it runs the exit logic for the state and the enter logic for the new state. It has a end attack montage function, which is ran at the end of the attack to switch it back, end of attacking to switch back to the idle state. And there's functions to open and close the weapon collider, and a function which is ran at the start of on collisions, which is bound to the on begin component overlap. This basically gets the target dummy and runs the target dummy's on hit function. In the target dummy, we have a begin play, which doesn't work. We don't need that. And with the tick, we have if it's been hit, well, let's do the on hit first. On hit says hit is true, and it saves its original location. If it's been hit, it will start a timer, which is essentially an invulnerability timer. It shakes the target dummy, and after the hit, it sets the hit to false and puts it back to the original location for the shake. We have the base state here, which has enter, update, and exit, and also a transition, which will always return either itself or the full state. This is the example of a state, which is the movement state. Its, its update function is responsible for the player movement, so it gets the forward and right direction of the player and applies movement accordingly. In the transition, we have a check to see if there's any movement input. If not, go to the idle state. If there is, and it's sprinting, sprint state. If it's not, walk state. As well as this, we also have the attack state, which is responsible for setting the attack ball and losing stamina upon attacking, as well as resetting the attack ball and other variables like the combo attacks done. Back into the editor, we have the animation blueprint for the player. This will change toggle enums, well, change the enum to idle, sprinting, and other states depending on what the actual state is in the script. For example, it gets the player character. If it's in the idle state, it sets this to idle, and this is used in the animation graph, anim graph, where we have different anim state machines. Where, for example, in the movement state, we go into the idle animation. If a condition, well, and then if the walking condition is true, go into the walking state. The walking condition just checks if the player state is walking. As well as this, in the animation graph, sorry, in the event graph, we have the attack function, which checks if it's in the attack state like the other functions. However, in this one, it plays the montage, an attack montage, if the conditions are met. Here we have the attack montage, which is a collection of 3 animations, light, light 2, and medium. On each animation, there is a notify to open the weapon collider and close it during the attacks, so that it will go off at appropriate times. And also towards the end, it has a combo check notify, which checks if the combo can happen. As well as this, on the final um, animation in the montage, we have a notify to check if well, to basically end the attacks and switch back to the idle state. Here we have the 3 notifiers used. So first we have the combo check notify, which is run at the end of the attack animation. It says if the player wants to do a combo, which is enabled by clicking the attack button during an attack animation, it turns it off, so it basically has the another check to do the next animation, and then it will, and then if it, then it will carry on with the montage. If it's not trying to do a combo, it will stop the montage and leave the player make the player go back to the idle state. On the open, we have a open and close weapon notify, which essentially just open the weapon collider of the player's sword. And at the final attack, we have the end notify, which just ends the attack montage, which makes it switch back to the idle state. Here in the content browser, we can see the input mapping context and the actions for the player inputs. In the mappings, we've got a jump, look, move, attack, and sprint inputs. And for example, within the move input action, we have it's a 2D axis, which is bound to the W, S, A, and D keys to move the player. If we go back to the player character script, we can see where these inputs are assigned. And if we take a look at one of the inputs, we can see that there's conditions for the input to not go through, but the action to go through, that's bound to the input. For example, you can only attack if you're grounded and you have enough stamina. Here we have the GitHub for the project. This was almost done 3 minutes ago because I forgot to push it. But it's a decent log of the project progress. So we have the project set up, the character, the state machine, animations, the attacking, weapon combos, the collision, making the game feel better, and then the final few touches. Quick overview of the state, how the state machine works. In the tick update function for the player controller, it runs the state update and then the state transition, which returns the next state. And if it's a different state, it will switch the state. In the state transition, we have we run the base class transition, which either returns falling or this, being the same state. And after some checks, it could either return a different state depending on the logic or the same state. This is the file structure. So we have our C++ classes here. In the content, it's split into the assets that I've made, stuff from the store, and the stuff like starter content and the built-in stuff. The assets, we've got the art, which is the images and materials used, entity, which is the character stuff, and target dummy, for example, the blueprints, game mode, the level, the sound, sword animations used, and the UI. Sound of the sword hitting is played here using the sword hit sound. Sword slash particle is played in blueprint as I couldn't get the C++ version to work. With a demonstration of the sound of the particles. And that's it. Thank you.